Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. Today we're going to get started on remote learning, and what we're doing this week is kind of taking it slow. So the only thing you're going to have do is I want you to listen to this PowerPoint and then go online and take the quiz over it. I can't stop you from using your book. I can't stop you from using this PowerPoint to do the best you can do on the quiz. I'm also planning on creating a worksheet where you identify certain areas of landforms, like regions within the United States and Canada. So let's go ahead and get started. We are starting on Chapter 5. Here we're talking about the physical geography of the United States and Canada. Very beautiful place on Earth. Okay, so first of all, we're going to look at landform and resources, and this is section 1, and that's all we're going to do for today. And so hopefully I can keep this very brief. Right, if you look, oh my goodness, if you've traveled around the United States or Canada at all, you know that it's very beautiful and it's also very diverse. Here it seems like I've put in a lot of things with water, right, and mountains. Top center, that's about as close as we get to where we are, but that's out on the Great Plains there. You can see the bottom center. If you've guessed that was New York, you are correct, right? So there are a lot of different locations, and we're going to go and look at some of them. Okay, so if you look at North America, technically it also includes the area there of Central America and Mexico, as a landmass. But the area that we're talking about, just Canada and the United States, that makes up 4/5 of it. This is the area that was established by, we kind of call it Anglo-America. The dark green there, the main language is English. That's because the British originally colonized. They came over, of course, they set foot at Jamestown 1607. And then from there, they just started piling into Massachusetts, and they kind of took over the continent. The light green, kind of the mint area up there in Canada, that is where they speak mostly French. And that is because the French came down the St. Lawrence River, and they imparted some people from their culture, or they implanted people from their culture there. There's going to be a war that begins in 1754, and that's the French and Indian War. It ends in 1763, and at that time the French are forced out of Canada, at least their government. The people remained though, and so the culture continued. If you look at the bottom 1/5, that area was colonized by Spain. As a matter of fact, most of I can't say most because Brazil was Portugal, but a good chunk of Central and South America was colonized by Spain. And so that's known as Latin America. And so even though Mexico and Central America is part of our continent, geographically, right, physically, they are not culturally. And so that's why there's a distinction here. So in this chapter, we're just focusing on that 4/5 that is Canada and the United States. Okay, so if you look at this huge landmass, right? The largest country in the world is Russia, by far. Much of it, though, people don't live in because it's just so cold. Same with Canada, though, too. If you look at Canada, it's the second largest, and it's a very close race between the United States and China. The United States kind of ekes out the third largest country in the world. So if you look at it, the second and third largest countries in the world make up Canada and the United States, and that region that we're going to talk about. Okay, so one thing about this area is just rich in natural resources, and you could see that. It's kind of hard to see on this map, but you've got coal, natural gas, oil, there's minerals, there's all sorts of things in these areas, rich farmland, everything else, abundant forests, water, very ample water supply, all sorts of things we're blessed with here in North America. Okay, we also have a lot of different landscapes. I'm going to try to draw on here. I'm not very good at this, but I'll give it a go. So if we look at the landforms, some of them we share between our two countries, right? So if you go here and you look at this region right here, there's Rocky Mountains run all the way up here. And as a matter of fact, they kind of go down into this location too, right? So we share that. There's also out here kind of a flat area. Along here, there's a whole bunch of plains that includes the Canadian Shield up here, the Great Plains, and the Central Plains as well. And then you can kind of, to some extent, the Appalachian Mountains, they run just a little bit north of Maine up here. So they run in there too. So we kind of shared that with them as well. So a lot of the land features that we have in the United States just continue up into Canada. So I want you to keep track of those. Know the Rocky Mountains, know the Central Plains, know the Appalachian Mountains, or if you were in Appalachia, they say Appalachian Mountains, right? Okay, so one thing that we don't share with them is the eastern lowlands. So if you look at this area right here, this is down here along the Gulf of Mexico, a little bit just south of the Delmarva Peninsula. You remember the Delmarva Peninsula, we talked about this in class. This is the Delmarva Peninsula right here. So you just go south of that, and this whole area, including Florida, right? This area right here is the eastern lowlands because it's low there. This is kind of a drainage area where water is coming down from the Central Valley, the Central Plateau, Central Plains, down the Piedmont region. And the Piedmont region, what that is this area right here as water will flow down the Appalachian Mountains into the ocean there. There's a bunch of rivers where it flows to, right? So that's where it's discussed over here, the Piedmont region, which would be the 1, 2, 3, 4th bullet point down. Also along there are some good natural harbors. Most of the best harbors that we have though in the United States are in the Pacific or in the northeastern part of the United States. Boston, Philadelphia, New York, of course, has a very good harbor, right? Also, we get the Mississippi River that flows down here into the Gulf of Mexico, which you guys know where the Mississippi is, right? So we get that there. All right, so the Appalachian Mountains, this is one of 2 large mountain chains in the United States. There's this one, of course, and then there are the Rocky Mountains. These are a lot older. These are the Appalachian Mountains than the Rocky Mountains. So they emerged, and then over time they just eroded and wore down. They're not very tall in comparison to the Rocky Mountains. In the Appalachian Mountains, though, in the Appalachian Mountains, they span the entire area right here. But in them, you're going to have, people have given them different names. Like right here's the Blue Ridge Mountains, right? If you go up into Vermont, they call them the Green Mountains. In New Hampshire, they call them the White Mountains, right? So the Catskills are down here. So all these different ranges, they're all part of the Appalachian Mountains, but people in those areas call them something different, right? So there's just like, they're different ranges within the big range of the Appalachian Mountains. Okay, so one thing I get very excited about is the Appalachian Trail. It is on my bucket list to do the whole thing. I kind of started it last summer. I went out to that area right there between like West Virginia, Kentucky, and Virginia in through here, and I went to Appalachian, the Appalachian Trail School. It was kind of a big mistake, but I did learn a lot about it. But anyway, this is a trail that originally was just maintained by this one guy, Benton McKay. He kind of wanted to create this trail. And so there were more and more people. There was a club, and they're the ones that maintained it. And, you know, just like they volunteered, they did it themselves. And so they did this, but it fell into disrepair during World War II. And then there was a push for it to become part of the National Park District or system, and it did become that in 1968. It runs over 2,000 miles. A lot of people like to start and do through hikes. They'll start maybe in Atlanta and go all the way up to Maine, where it ends there. It goes through 14 different states. But My plan was to hike it, maybe do a week or two each summer to see how far I could get. But there are people who do it, and they kind of race to see who could do it the fastest on these through hikes. But anyway, if you're interested in it, and this would have been something that we would have watched in class, at least a portion of it, there's a link right here to it, and it tells you all about it. This is about an hour long. Though, so obviously I'm not going to show it here, and I don't even have the technological capability to do that. But anyway, the Appalachian Trail, again, it starts here from northern Georgia, runs all the way up here, goes through various locations, crosses over the Hudson River, which about right here, right, and then kind of moves on where it comes up right there, last location. Very, very cool. Okay, so we got the mountains over here. We got the Appalachian Mountains on the east. We got the Rocky Mountains that just kind of dominate the west, right, as do other mountain ranges there. But in between the Appalachian Mountains and the Rocky Mountains, you have flat areas. And so that flat area includes the interior plains right here, sorry, and then also the Canadian Shield, which is right here. And then you've also got the Great Plains right there, right? So that's basically where we are. And a plain, as you know, is something that is flat. So up there with the Canadian Shield, though, what's interesting about that is that's hard bedrock. So that's slightly different. You're going to get bogs. It's going to be very wet and moist up there. So this area, of course, was flattened by glaciers and glaciation. So there's a lot of lakes, there's a lot of rivers, and then low-lying hills, right, and valleys. Right, here's another image of it, or same image, a little bit bigger, right? So as I said, it spreads from the Appalachian Mountains to the Mississippi, that's the interior plain and the Great Plains, and then goes on to the Rocky Mountains. The Great Plains, as it says, they're largely treeless area. You'll see a picture of it in just a second, and they rise up. If you were to drive, and maybe some of you have, if you were to drive from here to Colorado or something like that, you would sense that you're going up, and then you keep going, and pretty soon, boom, there are the Rocky Mountains, right? So it's just a gradual incline as everything kind of lowers and comes down here. Right, this is what I'm talking about. It's largely treeless plain, right? There might be some trees out there, and then you just see the Rocky Mountains. This is where the Great Plains meet them. All right, so the Canadian Shield, as I told you, it's real boggy. So here, if you have a lake, if you've ever been to Lake Shelbyville, Lake Sarah, any ponds around here, you'll see that the water is really murky. That's because there's soil underneath, right? And so it makes it very cloudy. If you go to this area up here, and you can kind of see, you can kind of tell all the lakes that are in all of these different places. The reason for that is it's on this bedrock. It's just very, very thick rock that is right there, and so the ground is not very thick, and the dirt isn't, right? So it pretty much encircles all of Hudson Bay right there, and it's real boggy. So it's going to look like this in areas. And when you look into the water, it's not going to be that murky water. It's going to be crystal clear, because instead of, my dog's having a bad dream, instead of there being dirt and sand underneath, it's rock. So it's really crystal clear. Right? You probably wouldn't want to swim in it though, because it's pretty cold. Right? So it's very high too in elevation in some areas. So it's not always really flat, not always plain. It just levels off. Okay, then the Western Mountains, and there are varying degrees of these here. You've got over here, this is the main part of the Rocky Mountains that continues up here into Canada and then down into Mexico. But you've got others as well. The next one, looking over here, are the eastern border of California, right in here. These are the Sierra Nevadas. I'm sure you probably heard of the Donner Party. That's where they got stuck, when they were on their way out west. And then what you find here, you got these coastal ranges. There's some here and here. And then up here, what we call these coastal ranges, these are the Cascades right in through there. right? The mountains in there. And of course, these were created because we know that plate tectonics is at work there. You got the Pacific plate going under the North American continental plate, and so it creates a ridge there, and it also brought about the growth of these Rocky Mountains. If you look over here, the highest peak of the Rockies is up in Alaska. We used to call it Mount McKinley, but they've taken over an indigenous name. It's Denali, right? That is what it's called now. So these are 80 million years old. They haven't eroded. They're very jagged with really high peaks, right? It goes all the way down front, at least in the United States and Canada. It kind of comes down, starts in Alaska and goes down to New Mexico here, but actually moves down into Mexico, the Sierra Madre Orientals, right? This is the continental divide right here, this line. At this point, if you were there, that's the center point for the mountains. So that is where if water were to flow, it would go this way on this side and this way on the other side, right? So you can kind of see where it is over here on this map. Okay, and so you see peaks like that. At some point beyond the tree line, vegetation just won't grow because it's too cold or there's no oxygen up there, which of course plants need the oxygen. All right, there are also a lot of northern islands. You could see some very big ones north of Canada, up there into the Arctic Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean, the North Atlantic Sea. Greenland, of course, is a big island. It's not considered to be part of North America, though. I think it's considered more to be part of Europe. Actually, I don't know. I need to ponder that one and look. But you can see some other big islands, Ellesmere, Victoria, and Baffin Island, very, very large. For the United States, there are the Aleutian Islands, which are right here, archipelago here that's coming down from Alaska, and then, of course, the Hawaiian Islands. All of these islands are volcanic islands, and that's how they were formed, right? So let's see, yeah, North America, the Hawaiian Islands, of course, are not part of North America, part of the Pacific Islands. All right, resources have been very crucial to the development of the United States and Canada, two very wealthy nations. So here on our continent is some of the richest soil in the world. Actually, I would even argue in our state, right? So as a result, we lead other nations. We're like one of the greatest agricultural producers in the world, also have been the leader in industry, and we've been very fortunate. We've become very wealthy as a result of that due to the abundance of our natural resources. Okay, so let's see, oceans and waterways. We, of course, as you know, we have two coasts. We have the Atlantic coast and, of course, the Pacific coast. Not very many countries can say that, but of course Canada can, right? Because they too have coasts there. But there's also the Arctic Ocean, right? And then there are many, many rivers. Oh, and don't forget the Gulf of Mexico down here, right here. See, I told you I'm not very good at this. And lots of lakes too. So we've got the Great Lakes up here, right? Many, many rivers. I want to teach you to a mnemonic device to remember the Great Lakes. They start here, right? Superman helps everyone. I can't do this. Superman helps everyone. So that stands for Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Lake Erie, and Lake Ontario. You can remember it with Holmes, but it doesn't put it in that order. But anyway, 8 of the world's largest 15 lakes are located here in North America. Right. We also have abundant land and forests, especially up in the Pacific Northwest. So Oregon, Washington, and then moving up into Canada as well. The United States, half of Canada and 1/3 of the United States was covered with forests at one time. Right. And as I told you before, the United States and Canada leads the world in food production and food export. All right, let's see, just a couple. Oh, this is our last slide. Another thing that we have too are a lot of minerals and fossil fuels, right? So the minerals, because of mountains, it's typical that you find a lot of minerals in mountains. We have iron ore, gold, nickel, um, copper, silver. Some of the greatest reserves, the Comstock lode, one of the greatest silver finds in the history of the world was here in the United States. Right? So we also, both countries have coal, natural gas, and oil. I don't know if this is true, but according to your book, and remember this because it's going to be on the quiz, the United States, because we are one of the world's greatest consumers of oil, we do need to import oil, even though I think that's changed somewhat in the last few years. I'm not sure, so don't quote me on that one. But anyway, that is section 1 of chapter 5. Next week, I hope to do at least 2 more sections. Once you've done this, go ahead and go online and take the quiz. It will be posted to Google Classroom. I also sent you an email about it. Hope to see you and talk to you soon. Actually, I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye.